Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Thomas.
Hello. Thank you for being here to witness this.
So, I've got a stack of questions, thanks to those of you in the audience who gave these to me. And I'm without any editing, I'm just going to go through them. So here we are. Congratulations. That's not me talking. No, I already said beautiful piece. Congratulations from me. Congratulations from whoever wrote this. What was the mood or feelings you want the audience to walk away with?
You think the composer would immediately know the answer to that. But composition is often a discovery process. Very rarely do I know what I want to do going in. Things just begin to form as you work ahead. But as I got into the piece, I realized what I was enjoying most about it was this feeling of lift I was getting. And I thought, I'd like things to feel like they're moving upward. There's been a lot of downward pressure in recent years, and I found the deeper I got into this piece, the more joy it was adding immediately to my life. And I thought, well, why not share a little bit of this?
Lovely. Along those lines, was Echoes of Light inspired by a specific story? It seems to follow a dense narrative with some parts representing actions and some parts describing emotions. It is a very rich piece that creates a whole world.
Well, seeing as I'm also a film composer, that's about the nicest compliment a composer can have. It's like, oh good, I can world build through music. Maybe I should keep doing this. But yeah, there is a bit of a story. It doesn't feel like much of a story. It's funny what will spark an entire piece of music. It could just be the smallest thing. And in this case, I think it was. It was in October, early in October, I was walking to my car late at night in Los Angeles. And as you do in Los Angeles, you're stepping over broken glass and garbage in the streets. And there was a lot of broken glass under my feet getting onto the curb. And a few cars had driven by, and they'd broadcast this light into a kaleidoscope show, just swirling between buildings. And I could swear I could hear the sound of the light echoing between the buildings. And it had this really distinctive blue color that just felt like the key of D to me, and that's where it starts. And I thought, I want to capture this and create as many variations on that experience as I can to really create a visual experience. Say what you will about the music, but I hope it sounds like light reflecting around. There's the world building point again. So that was the story behind this piece. Yeah.
Well, that leads nicely into this question. Are you synesthetic?
Actually, yes. I was dodging that word because often a discussion has to follow. For those of you unfamiliar, synesthesia is a neurological condition where two or more sensory modalities in your brain get fused together for whatever reason. And early on in life, I realized when I would hear a sound out in public, like a horn, a door could close and something could ring in the room, and I knew exactly what key on the piano it would be. And we just thought it was regular perfect pitch at first, but after college, I realized there's this word, synesthesia, that means when people like me can see a color before we identify the pitch. And I realized it was the colors that were always cueing me. And so for me, music isn't just an auditory thing, it's completely mixed in with my sense of color. So every time I hear a note, or if you're speaking, I can see every little flash of color in your voice, pitch for pitch, which can be overload for information. Sometimes I just want to hear what you're saying and not think about what notes I'm hearing, but they are bundled together for better or worse.
Some nuts and bolts here. What inspired your chord progression choices?
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on in that piece. It's very, I would say, maybe rhythmically active or rich. But The other truth about this piece is the composition is very simple. The harmonic language is very easy. Anybody could play those chord progressions, maybe not in spaghetti form like I've written them for Jeff on the piano. His fingers are flying all over, but really I had this issue where I was getting deep into all the rhythm craziness, and I was trying to use much more modern harmonic language, from, like Bartok, Prokofiev, and closer to now, and nothing seemed to feel right with the rhythm in the piece, the more modern the harmony got. And I realized if I pushed the rhythm forward, but I pulled the harmony back 1 century, it got a little bit easier to listen to. Then I pulled it back another century, and I landed on Handel, finally. And when you hear it again, you may notice there's a certain kind of ascending chord progression. It kind of played into the spirit I wanted you to feel from the piece. And Handel has this really bright way of elevating harmony, especially in his choral works. And really, a lot of the harmony in this piece is just Handel. Very simple.
So, as the composer, we're all hearing this for the first time. What's it like for you to hear your composition for the first time?
Yeah, like a lot of things, it doesn't, for me, certain emotions don't hit right away, whether it's good or bad news. It's just still detonating in my brain what just happened. I'm still dealing with the fact, oh wow, it's done. They played it. It sounded great. I can't believe it exists. That's where my head is right now. There's a lot of joy bubbling up. It'll break at some point. So maybe not in front of everyone, but it's there. Yeah.
What was the compositional process or involvement between you and the musicians to put this together?
Oh gosh, I wrote it, I sent it in. Nobody wanted me to start over. They seemed to think it was playable enough. And so we just went with it. And this afternoon was the first time I heard it in rehearsal. Okay,
sort of a career question. How did you get your start as a TV/film/theme park composer and achieve success in that industry? Theme park music is such an underappreciated medium. Do you have any particular inspirations or favorite pieces in that genre?
Oh, a couple questions. Well, I'll start with the last bit, inspiration. Favorite piece, gosh, I don't know. Film and theme park music aren't so different. It's just the craft of how you apply music to motion picture is one thing. You're chasing fractions of a second. You're watching picture go by, a scene cuts, you want to land with it. You're just micro-adjusting tempo and changing time signatures to line the music up. You have this really complicated tempo and meter map that you need to write music over that sounds like it's very intuitive to listen to. You have to obscure the fact that the music's all over the place and it has to feel natural to picture. Theme parks, you do the same kind of job, but you're only just hitting around the right second. So you can really level out your tempo and write a little more predictably. And it's a lot easier to write theme park music. But really just any great cinematic composer and could be an influence. I really love the music of Michel Legrand, a French film composer, and just great composer in general, jazz musician, to John Williams, to the weird quirkiness of Danny Elfman, just all the above. They've all informed me along my journey, and I consider them my teachers for how to do this. And of course, concert composers, Prokofiev, Poulenc. Poulenc's got that fabulously flashy, fun, irreverent, except for when he's extremely reverent side, and just a force of personality. And I often look to Poulenc for inspiration. Yeah.
Well, speaking of inspiration, I've got a couple here, a couple cards with names I want to run by you. Eric Korngold was asking if Eric Korngold is an inspiration.
Eric Wolfgang Korngold.
Yeah. Philip Glass. And did I hear a nod to Bernstein somewhere at the end of the piece?
Gosh, maybe. I may have subconsciously just been ripping him off the whole time. That's a fine question.
I've done that.
Yeah, it does happen, actually. I'm not sure where. I know that tune. I'm not sure where it would have been. I mean, maybe down there somewhere. But yeah, Korngold, yeah, he only wrote, I think, 18 scores for film. But they're considered probably 18 of the finest scores ever written. You know, he was like the great opera composer who was chased out of Europe into Hollywood and took a break from his concert writing career to score some movies, and then attempted to go back into opera later. It kind of turns into a sad story after that, so I'll cut that off. Philip Glass, I think we all know Philip Glass. Believe it or not a real inspiration for this piece. He would probably be a little more measured than I am.
So let's see, this is a three-part question here. We've got, what images did you have in mind in the first section? The piano and marimba sounded so interesting. Anything inspire that material? And it sounded like you were challenging yourself. Was there something particular that you wanted to accomplish with this piece?
The last question is a deep one. So the first part was what again?
The opening section.
Opening section.
Yeah.
I had gone back and forth with having this really ambient, slow opening, and then the piece racing off all of a sudden where it starts now. And I'm still on the fence about that, but there was a point where I thought, well, it doesn't need to be any longer than it is, and what would that add to start in that fashion? When I was trying the ideas out, I'll sit with some software and play every instrument's part by hand into a computer, and then hit play and just see how it performs back. And there was something about the way it just bites right away, you know, silence, and doom dick ding, doom dick doom, doom dick doom, and just to race off got my attention. And I don't know if it got your attention right away, but I liked the way it grabs me right away. And I thought, no need for a soft start. We'll just dive right into the composition. So that was the first part, just catch us.
Yeah. And the other part of it was the piano and marimba.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a good observation. They work together almost the entire piece. And what I wanted to, you know, in an effort to create the audio delay effect, I tried to offset everyone's entrances a bit, so you'd hear the piano, marimba, so they're all following each other, and who's ever not playing that little bouncy rhythm is going to be fractured into tiny little bursts, bing, 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 just a little bit off the beat, just to make it a bit angular, but give the effect a little bit of swirl. Yeah. And then, what was I trying to accomplish?
Yeah,
Right?
it sounded like you were challenging yourself. Was there something particular you were trying to accomplish with this?
I feel like I was trying to grow somehow, and I feel like I did, but I'm not sure how yet. I think I adopted some new flavors into my palette. Most of the time, I'm knocking through something for film or a theme park, and I don't get to think that deeply about what I'm writing. You know, there's 65 minutes of music to write, and we have maybe 2.5 months to get it composed and recorded. And so you can't get too sentimental. And so whenever I get the chance to write a concert piece, there's something, I take it as an opportunity to do something difficult that scares me. And this piece really scared me. I really struggled with it. And the harmonic language and everything, it couldn't be simpler. It's a very simple composition in a lot of ways. The rhythm just makes it seem harder. But I really wish I knew what I what I learned from this. I think it's just so fresh. It's still registering. Yeah.
Great. I have one question of my own to add to this pile. What did the Young Composers Project mean in your life?
Well, that kind of relates to another question from earlier about getting a start in these industries. I would say those two are one and the same. The Young Composers experience was monumental for me. I grew up in Pendleton, and I didn't have access to musicians like this in my life. I came from a lot of family support and a lot of instructors and locals who went far out of their way to do what they could for me. But finally I had a piano teacher who was like, you know, I have heard of this thing in Portland. It sounds like it's just for you. Let's get in touch with them. And it was the first experience I could draft an idea and let professional musicians look at it and one by one give me feedback about how to improve what I was writing. It could either be a compositional comment like, you know, this isn't really much of a tune. You're kind of hovering around a few notes. Listen to this Beethoven line here. Look how athletic it is. He's here and then he leaps and he's going to descend here and then changes direction for no good reason, and now it's interesting in a whole new way, and just help me connect those dots, or tell me, oh, on the oboe, that note does not exist, actually. You should bring that down, and from very mundane and practical things. And my first college application, the top 3 tracks were Fear No Music pieces I did for Young Composers Project, and then it was just whatever else I had, from my high school choir singing and things like that. But it started me on the path to asking better questions about music, and they encouraged me to grow, and I consider it very important to my experience getting to this point. So, yeah. I was a sophomore in high school when I started, so I'd missed 1 year. But no, I'm extraordinarily grateful, always have been, for that experience. Yeah.
Well, Chris, your insight and your enthusiasm is just so inspiring, and as is your music. And I'm anxious to hear it again now, knowing what you were thinking about. I think we'll wrap it up there, unless there's one final question anyone is dying to ask out in the hall.
Well, I had talked to you earlier about communication, stuff like there's a lot of reverse instrumentation.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was a really interesting effect in the music. What inspired you to do that?
Yeah, it was just trying to capture the experience and the sense that I could hear something that you couldn't hear. It was that bouncing, ricocheting light. It was just such a trip to see something and really feel like you could hear it. I know there was no sound, but it was so alive in the air that it was that one little spark that made me want to do that. And then, there was a little project to figure out how to make things. I wanted the audience to be fooled in thinking that these microphones were causing an audio delay loop that made the music sound this way. But it's just written on the page. It's as performed. And to get those little reverse effects, I was just playing around with some different instruments, and percussion is just my favorite part of the orchestra. And it's just infinitely colorful. There's more variety there than anywhere else. And, one day I picked up the crotale, suspended it, ding, that really pure tone. And I thought, I wonder how it'll behave on a timpani. What about a cymbal? And then finally a snare drum had this interesting effect, but it wasn't that pronounced. Someone encouraged me to turn it over so the little bristles, are sitting up on the snare, on the upside. And as soon as we struck the crotale, moved it closer, it began to rattle, so bing. Then as you get closer, as you set the crotale down, it dampens the head of the drum and into silence. So it has this reverse suctioning effect. And it just seemed to play into the effect I was looking for. Yeah.
Great. Well, Chris, thank you so much.
Sure.
And,
thank you.
Let's give Echoes of Light another hearing.
Thank you. Appreciate it.